Hello, everyone, and welcome to What's Up Doc, an initiative developed by the University of Michigan Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. What's Up Doc is a professional development interview series created to support the career exploration efforts and professional development needs of current postdocs. You will hear from former postdocs discuss their own postdoc experience and share advice on their experience transitioning into their career of choice. We hope you will get the answers you want and need to make an informed decision about your own career. I am Anne-Sophie Borer.
And I am Maureen Bonnet.
Today, we welcome Dr. Daniel Wilinski, who recently completed his postdoc at the University of Michigan in the Department of Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology. And he is now the CEO of his own company, Keryx. Keryx is developing breakthrough RNA therapeutics that prevent diabetes at a cellular level. Welcome, Daniel, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, same for us, Daniel. It's a real pleasure to have you in What's Up Doc. And I know you have a very interesting story to tell, but how about we start with Keryx? So first of all, I'm wondering why this name Keryx, and can you maybe tell us a little bit more about your mission at Keryx? What's the problem you're trying to solve?
Yeah, great. Thank you for asking me that. Um, so at Keryx, we're primarily focused on building RNA-based medicines to kind of prevent or mitigate metabolic diseases, sort of with an eye towards longevity. So how can we live longer, better, healthier lives? And I started thinking about diabetes during my postdoc at the University of Michigan, and it's sort of fallen into it's become a big part of Keryx, what Keryx is doing. And so we identified ways in which we can fix or rejuvenate the cells that make insulin. They're called beta cells in your pancreas, and restore their function so that you can so that you don't progress to diabetes. And so that's kind of what we've been working on at Keryx. Keryx is an ancient Greek word that means messenger, or the word I like to use is herald. It's really think of like somebody bringing the news. So think to the nucleus for us scientists out there, taking the news, the information from the nucleus, from that sort of basic fundamental molecule DNA and doing something interesting with it out in the cytoplasm that is translating proteins, sending it out through axons, through your neurons, putting protein, putting the functional units of a cell in the place that it needs to go. That's what Keryx sort of says to me. And that's why I named the company Keryx, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use this kind of news, this information to affect disease, to end diseases, really.
That's very interesting and quite interesting to be on that side of, the mic and listen to you talk about this. And so I understand that Keryx is a very young company that you started in 2025. And so I imagine that being a CEO at that stage means that you're probably multitasking a lot. And so we wondered if you had any collaborators or employees that work with you. And in general, if you could walk us through what, the life of a CEO looks like.
I think it's important to remember that, yes, as you mentioned, Anne-Sophie, I am very new at this and I don't have answers to most of the questions. But, you know, I spent a fair amount of time during PhD and postdoc training to run a lab, running a research in lab, right? I think that's kind of the point of a postdoc. You take your knowledge of science and then you in your postdoc you learn how to run your own research group. And that might come up later in the conversation too a bit. But I am new and I do a lot of things. And this is there are so many things. It's you have to buy supplies, you have to think about the experiments, you have to get approvals and do all the things that you would do in a scientific any science endeavor. Manage people. So I have two technicians who work in the lab. I'm looking for other people to join the executive team, in particular, because there's so many things to do. Part of being successful means you have more and more things to do. So that's really feels good, but there's a lot. Um, and I think it's exciting and there's lots to learn. But that's something we do as scientists and as postdocs. We learn new things. And so I think that actually has been one of the things I've enjoyed the most about starting Keryx the past few months is learning very different things. Things about how to sell your product, what your product is, what is the problem you're solving, those kinds of things that we think about, I think, at the bench some, but it's more detailed. What is the problem with this PCR? What is the problem with this biological system? This is a bit different way of thinking. So
Yeah, that sounds very exciting and challenging at the same time. I'm wondering what difference do you see between running a lab and running a business? Because Keryx is a lab, but it's also a business. So what are the main differences and what could be some challenges that you face while coming from running a lab to running a business?
I would say they're exactly the same. No, I'm totally kidding. Um, uh, it it people segregate them into, the business side and the science side. And I think as a function of being new, I think we kind of everything's the same thing, right? It's just Keryx. We're doing science in pursuit of building this commercial enterprise to sell a product to help people feel better. And that's really, that's our mission is, I have a very strong family history with diabetes. It's intellectually stimulating. So what makes it different from running just science? You're still fundraising, whether you have an academic lab, you're writing grants. I am pitching to investors to get money to run the company, to hire people to do the science, to do all of the other things we do. Um, I think there's a lot of overlap. There certainly are different things, but I think the training I received as a postdoc set me up well to run a company. I've had to learn a lot of new things, and that's been exciting because in a university setting, you don't have to think about how do you actually receive money from people? You setting up a bank account, getting insurance, buying lab benches, very practical things that you have to do in a business. Thinking about how you sell this to customers as opposed to sell it to your fundraiser, to your funders. Those are kind of different. The other big thing is the speed. So in academia, we're used to going deep, and that's really gratifying for me. I think so much of science, so much of what makes science rich and something I like doing is the deepness, going deep into a problem and understanding it very fundamentally. And I think that's where the real discoveries come from. But it's different outside of the academy, outside of proper research. And we have to think about, is this good enough? Is this safe so that we can give somebody a cure for a disease, or can we help somebody feel better, or help them live longer? So
Hmm.
those are the big
That
differences as I see it.
that's very interesting. I have a bit of a follow-up on this. So you mentioned that your postdoctoral training at U of M set you up essentially to become a CEO. And so a few things. First of all, did you know that's where you wanted to go? But also, I'm very curious to know what, now that you're a CEO, looking back, what are the things that really helped you set you up for that route? And was it solely coming from your PI, from your lab environment, from your department, or was it also coming from all the resources available at U of M?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. So maybe I'll start with, so what set me up for to become the CEO of Keryx? I didn't expect to do this. My focus really was singular on becoming an academic PI, running a research group at an R1, doing research in a big way. That had been my focus probably ever since I was a kid, even before I knew what a professor did in an R1.
Wow.
And because of that, there's a problem with that attitude. So I think you almost have to have that attitude in order to become a professor. You have to be so focused on that academic network, publishing, which I have a lot to say about. I did not publish enough. If my PI is listening, she'll agree with that. Um, I, I think right. So I think you have to be very singularly focused to get that job at a great research institution that you might want. I think in ways that that my training set me up well for what I'm doing now are I'm still running a research group, which that was what I was training to do. Yes, it's a different style of research. It's different in terms of some of the practicalities, but I'm still mentoring. I'm still progressing science. It's just at a different kind of level, different scale. Where it didn't set me up well, my academic pursuits didn't set me up well was um, not knowing anything about business, whatever business is, and that is kind of the squishy term that I think I as a scientist use, but I don't know a lot about financials. I don't know a lot about where money comes from and how money works outside of grants. And I've gotten to learn that. And that's been really interesting to me. So I wouldn't say that I would say that I'm at somewhat of a deficit because I was so singularly focused on academia. But it's not unsurmountable, at least I can say that now. Well, so I think, part of the transferable skills we talk a lot about, learning how to learn is so valuable. And I think we do that. If you're being successful, you have to do that no matter what your career is.
So it's actually a very good transition because I think my next question for you was, where did you, or did you ever get a business acumen at some point during your postdoc? And if there are people out there in the audience who are also thinking about, spinning out their research or starting their own company, may feel like scared or hesitant to do so. Do you have any resources or programs you could mention that you personally used or found helpful at U of M to kind of develop this business acumen, or did you just learn on the go?
So I think the question is, um, did I develop sort of business acumen skills during my postdoc? And the answer to that for me is no, not at all. Um, there are most certainly places you can go at U of M that I know about now, I didn't know
Mm,
about as a postdoc. In fact, I actively um, disregarded those resources when I was a postdoc because I thought I was on this academic route.
mm,
I thought I was building my lab and my network for building my academic lab. There are resources. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure uh, the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs knows of them and can point people to them. There's actually pretty decent resources in Ann Arbor. There's a group that I work with very closely called Ann Arbor Spark, which is fantastic. Teaches has taught me a lot about running a company, accounting. How do you make a financial projection? Like something I definitely did not have any concept of during my postdoc. So there are resources. There's a lot more resources than I actually knew there was, which is great. I would say to the question of I'm doing a postdoc and I'm thinking about starting a company, I would say to you, why are you waiting? Just do it. Because the longer you wait, the more behind you'll be. It's scary. Yes, you need some kind of safety net. Absolutely. I could just do a whole soapbox on that particular piece, but um, the academic postdoc is not designed to teach you how to start a company. It's designed to teach you how to build an academic lab. And there's a reason why industry postdocs are 1 year, right?
Mm,
Because the skills that you learn in industry are not the skills that we learn doing academic science. It's moving fast. It is doing things, a lot of assays, not doing a single assay at a time, doing hundreds of assays at once, doing things at a different scale, a different pace, which is hard to do in an academic setting because we care so much about knowing the fundamental details of things, which, for better or worse, that's not how biotech works.
mhm.
So that's my little my little soapbox. I would say if you think starting a company is right for you, find those resources and do it. Um, Doing a longer postdoc is not going to help. Getting a publication will publish, publish, publish. It's the currency even out here, which is
Mm.
surprising to me, but not at the expense of starting. Start. If you're ready to start, you're probably too late.
So now I'm very curious because, like you said, you were very much set on becoming an academic faculty. What was the moment where you realize, like, oh, actually, that's not where I'm heading, and I'm just gonna do my own thing? Was it a singular moment, like light bulb moment? Was it over time? Because, like you said, right, the idea is just to start, even if you're scared of doing it. So, what was it like for you?
It was agonizing. It's not just like I'd wanted to do this since I was a kid, pretending I was Darwin on the Beagle, right? I like everything I'd done up to that point was focused on this one goal. And I left other opportunities and I didn't do everything I could have done. And I had sunk so much into this particular endeavor. It was hard to say, I'm not going to do this. And that is the doing and starting an academic lab. There are two moments I can think of. One was on the way home from Toulouse, France, where my favorite job that I was offered. Um, had a wonderful visit at the university in Toulouse. So for those of you who don't know, it's sort of in southern France. It's a beautiful city on a river, of course. Everything you've heard about French food is amazing, is correct. I thought this was just talk before going to France and spending time there. It's actually true.
We
Uh,
can confirm.
Yes.
you guys can attest to that. Um, I loved it. And my colleagues were just so amazing. I still keep in contact with them. I just they're so great. Um, but I couldn't imagine starting a lab in French. I don't speak French. And I couldn't imagine doing it on such a shoestring budget, which is the French academic system.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart a little bit because I thought there's so many good things about it. I couldn't quite get my mind to work in that way. So that was one kind of moment in which I kind of came to terms with, okay, I'm not I'm not starting an academic lab. And the other one escapes me. I forgot. But that was a very like poignant moment. Okay, this isn't going to happen. I'm not I decided that I didn't want that. That wasn't what was right for me at this moment.
So I understand the reasons about starting the lab in France, and like first of all, we can confirm French food is amazing. Second, we can confirm that French budgets are not so amazing, and we are all aware of that. And Anne-Sophie and I are in the US for many reasons. But I want to mention that you were awarded a K-99 grant, which is amazing. So I believe you also had opportunities in the US with that grant. So whether something that makes you decide like I actually don't want to do that even in the US with the US budget and speaking English.
Yeah. Yeah, that is right. So I did have other offers, and one in particular I'm thinking of. It's on the East Coast. Made a sense because it was closer to family, which was really a draw. Um, but I didn't have that same feeling of being like in the right department and it being the right position for me. I didn't have that same like draw to the people in the department, and it was going to be a lot more expensive. Yeah, sure, the research budget was way bigger. Could have done some great research. Um, but at that point, I was also thinking about Keryx. It wasn't named yet, but like this idea it's kind of started percolating. And this just felt right. It just felt like I can't not do this with the information I have at the moment. And I think that's something that we talk a lot about in my family. You make the best decision you can with the information you have at hand. And part of that information for me was, do I really want to live on the East Coast again? It's really expensive. It's hard life, living in traffic. Do I want the rat race of an academic position, or do I want to build something? I've always wanted to build something, um, building an academic lab, building a company. Can I help people like more immediately? Maybe. I think that is probably true. Um, and so it was complicated, but yeah, it didn't have that same like I will throw my life into upheaval to move to this place where I have no people, to start a lab. Was it worth it? Did it feel worth it to do that? And I didn't think it felt worth it to do that. That was a
Hmm.
big part
Yeah,
of it. And I felt like I had
that
this
makes
other amazing option to do something really important and big.
Mm. Um, you mentioned earlier that obviously there's a lot of your academic training that you leverage to build your company and that you're still using to this day, being a small startup. One of the thing that you mentioned that is really similar to the academic route, but in a way extremely different, is getting investment, right? Reaching out to investors, people who would essentially allow your company to grow. I'm very curious to know how you did approach that, because the only real communication, right, that we do in academia is presenting at a conference or teaching or like presenting to an audience that is exactly in the same field as us that we can relate to. And I would assume that when it comes to presenting to investors is like, what I'm doing is amazing. Please give me your money. And they don't necessarily understand all the nitty-gritty details. So I'm very curious to know how you leverage the communication skills you had into making them and applying them to this brand new environment.
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think it's important to emphasize the fact that it is a new environment. It is a very different set of people. You're judged on different metrics, right? Like people look at my academic background and they say, oh, he's a scientist. He probably knows what he's talking about in terms of the science. A weird quirk of that when I'm talking to investors is most of the time they don't care about the science,
Hmm.
which hurts me a little bit, right? Like, um, but it's a different they're different motivation that those not those initial conversations, but those conversations come later when you really dig into the science. And they do care about the science because they're sophisticated people just like everyone. Um, but it's selling in a different way. It's selling a big idea often, depending on, who you're pitching to. So approaching from like, how do I communicate the science in a way that's compelling and exciting to a layperson who doesn't science in the same way that we might, um, but still trying to be true to what we can really do and what we can't do that is a balancing act I'm still figuring out for sure. Because my academic training teaches me to be very cautious, not to overstate, and to hedge everything. This is something I've really struggled to get over is in case A, this works. In case B, which is slightly different, it doesn't work. But this is the reason why, is not a good argument to make to an investor. What they want to know is, to the best of your knowledge, we trust you as a scientist. Will this work? And
Mm,
the answer to that is yes. There are caveats, but those are understood. What they also want to know is, will this be a product? Can I sell this thing? Because investors ultimately want to make money. That's why they're in that business. Um, so communicating is the same. It's just you just have to tune the dials, right? Being clear, knowing why you're doing something is the exact same thing we do in academia.
I think it's gonna be time that we jump on the rapid fire. Before we jump on it, any final advice for the audience thinking about why not me?
I think the final advice, yeah, why not you? I mean, you're at the University of Michigan doing a postdoc. You have a PhD. You know how many people have a PhD in the United States? Not that many. Even though we're in this bubble with a lot of really smart people, we need good, smart people doing lots of different things. Not everyone's going to be a professor, and not everyone should be a professor. So there's lots of other amazing opportunities. And why wait is also a thing. Like I think academic postdocs are super long for some good reasons, some bad reasons.
mm,
If you have other interests, pursue those. Um, because you're wasting time on things that may not forward you. And so that would be my advice is get out of the postdoc as soon as you decide you don't want to do an academic track.
mm.
And
Mhm.
people will disagree with me on that, but that's how I think.
And I want to add that as researcher regarding of your discipline, you are inherently a curious person. So being at U of M is such a great opportunity to be curious about so many things that you might have never heard of, you might have never thought about. But there are so many offices, so many resources, so many people with different backgrounds, different career, different journeys, that it is a prime time to ask those questions and yeah, get curious about something else than what happens in your lab or, in your research project. So, yeah, why not you?
Definitely.
I just wanted to add a quick question before we finish. Out of curiosity, is the work you do at Keryx stemming from the research you were doing during your postdoc? And if so, how did you approach, if you approached that conversation with your PI, how did you talk about that? This idea of like, this is what I want to do. Did you take any of that research with you, or is it really loosely based off of that and completely different?
So my lab was focused, Monica Deuce's lab in MCDB, focused on neuroscience in the fly and Drosophila melanogaster, and really how the metabolism and environmental impacts change how the flies respond to different stimuli. So I was really focused on sugar in the brain. That's kind of how Monica has been thinking about it for a little while. A little different now, I think. So no, I am not taking stuff from the lab. Ideas certainly. I mean, I worked on RNA in the flies, and now I'm still working in RNA, but that's kind of where it ends. It's an important conversation to have. I think my PI was really excited about hearing that I was starting Curix over starting a faculty job for different reasons. She's super supportive. She's great. So, that's something. Hopefully, you have a good mentor that is supportive of the decisions you make for good reasons, right? Not just yeah, this seemed like a good idea. Thoughtful reasons.
Great. Well, thank you, Daniel. So we are now getting to the final few minutes of our discussion, and it is now time for our rapid fire questions. So the only rule is to give the first answer that comes to mind. Are you ready?
I think so.
Don't worry, it's
As
gonna
long
go
as it's
fast.
appropriate, right?
It is, it is. We keep it PG. So what surprised you most about life after academia?
How much validation I get that I never got as an academic. Positive validation. You're doing a good job, Daniel. You're succeeding. Keep going.
That makes me emotional, not gonna lie.
Oh,
What is your favorite holiday?
Christmas.
What keeps you motivated during challenging times?
Our mission. Like I mentioned at the top, my mom, my brother still has diabetes, so I work on something that I care a lot about, and helping people. I mean, even in academia, is like this is why I did science, is to help people ultimately.
Amazing. What text would you send to yourself as a first day postdoc?
First thing out the top of my head, get out. Stop wasting your time. But I probably have to. I'm sure that wouldn't be the right thing.
there
I
is no
mean,
right or wrong.
Hindsight is
It's
2020. Like I had a really great time in my postdoc. Sometimes.
but sometimes the visceral reaction is what we actually look for in this section of the podcast. So, you know,
There's no way I would have given up academia at that moment. There's no way. No, people tell me I shouldn't. I succeeded. Then I got out.
yeah. And finally, do you have a new resolution or goal for 2026?
To run more. I have
that's
lots of goals for the company, but
that's a very good one. Okay, so I guess it's time to thank you, Daniel, for sharing your journey from your academic track to entrepreneurship. For our audience, please do not hesitate to connect with Daniel on LinkedIn with follow-up questions, and also follow the OPI LinkedIn page to see more episodes coming through in the next months.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Daniel. It was a pleasure chatting with you today.
yes, it was great to talk to you guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate